And I need to go live tonight too, and I'm not going to be able
Will you be able to go by yourself? But if you have a guest, it's
to.
looking like it says go live with others, so the guest must have to have a Facebook too. It seems.
And I need to also go see that, and I'm not going to be able.
Okay, we're live.
Hello.
What's up, everybody? So sorry for all the confusion that's going on. Technology has not been on our side today. Facebook done switched up how they do the live. So today we're going to be on YouTube with our awesome guests today. But just as a reminder, my name is Alexa Chanel Ashiel. I'm a special educator here in New York City and one of your awesome hosts for the Black Ed Talks.
Yes. And I'm Ebony Woods, an awesome host as well, here to just ready to set this off and get this party started.
Right. So this is going to be an awesome conversation because tonight we are going to memorialize some history, okay? And it's going to be centering on the importance of perseverance and consistency in the realm of advocacy, because sometimes we get tired, right? You're advocating for something, you want it to happen so bad, and you hit roadblock after roadblock, or the success or the wins are just so little that it's like you want to give up to the end. Well, this story that we're about to have today shows us why perseverance is key.
Yes, it is. And I am so excited for our guest, Zakia Ansari. She is going to come out and she is going to let us know what is going on and what moves her organization has been making.
All right, let's clap her on in. Hey. Yeah. Hi. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
A little hiccup with technology, but what is this pandemic without some technology hiccup, right?
That's right.
That's for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry. We are so glad that you can be here and join us today.
Yes, and I want to just read off your bio so people know who has entered the stage. All right. Yes. And you can definitely take a moment to, introduce yourself, like humanize yourself, because I'm about to put you on a pedestal, okay? Because of all the amazing things that you have done. So Ms. Zakia Ansari is the Advocacy Director of the New York State Alliance for Quality Education, AKA AQE. It is the leading statewide organization that has been fighting for educational justice in New York State for very long time. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. She's a mother of 8 children and the grandparent of 4. And she has dedicated 20 years of her life to fight for educational justice and the ending of oppression of Black and Brown people. Ms. Zakia, you were named one of the City and State Magazine's 25 most influential in Brooklyn. Okay, and as you do all these amazing things, you still find time to volunteer with the New York Justice League and Resistance Revival Chorus, and you are a 2020 Atlantic Fellow.
Okay.
Black Woman Magic.
Yes.
I need this today, boy. I'm not even gonna stop it. Usually I'm like, stop. Today I'm like, yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
both.
You get your flowers while you're here, right? That's what we have to be in the mindset of continuously doing. And we just thank you for all the work that you have done, the work that you are continuing to do, and it's needed. So we just thank you.
I appreciate it.
So we're gonna jump right in, right? Because we want to know. We have recently learned that New York lawmakers, right, reached an agreement to equitably fund public schools for the 2021-2022 school year, right, based on the New York State budget, which includes a phase-in plan to fully fund foundation aid over the next 3 years, right? So a 30-year fight for AQE. Can you tell us what it means for our schools, but more importantly, what does it mean for our children?
Yeah. Wow.
Break that down, because that was a lot of information.
Yeah.
Break that down for the people. What does all that mean?
Yeah. So a little background. So in 1993, then parent Robert Jackson, who was his daughters were in school, he was on the school board, realized that he was seeing things in the schools and was saying like, what's happening? Why is there so much inequity? But didn't just say it, he did something about it. And so he was a lead plaintiff in an equity lawsuit called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. Like I said, way back in 1993, right? So inequity was existing. So after a 13-year battle back and forth in the courts, the highest court, the Court of Appeals, upheld a decision and said, yeah, New York State is not meeting its constitutional obligation to provide every child with a sound basic education. And so because of the organizing work that we were doing at AQE and organizing parents and others, we were able to get then Governor Spitzer to put this historic amount of money of almost $6 billion. So what started off as a New York City lawsuit wound up being expanded to New York State. Why? Because the inequity exists all over Rochester, Buffalo, Hempstead, like all the parts of the state. There are pockets of inequity that still exist. And so for the first 2 years, we received those dollars. And then the market crashed, as many of us remember. And it's been the last 14 years for us since 2006 of getting New York State to remind them that they had not fulfilled their commitment to fully funding the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. So about $4 billion was owed. New York City specifically, about $1.1 billion out of that $4 billion. And because of the huge, the possibilities of all these confluences of things, I think if one thing was out of whack, we might not have gotten these dollars, right? We are going to see New York City specifically get $530 million from there. And also the federal government kicked in, right? Because in the midst of a pandemic, you can't make this stuff up, right? In the midst of a pandemic, of course, we needed more funding. And so not only did schools get cut last year, a lot of money, but now with this extra money coming in, New York State is also getting an additional $12 billion with a B from the federal government. So we have this finally bringing home the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, a 3-year phase-in, right? This year will be $1.4 billion, give or take, statewide. The next year will be 50% of what's left, and then the following year will be up to 100% of fully funding it in. So it's really huge. It's going to be the reality is, if parents, community members, and young people are not at the table, and educators, when these dollars are divvied up, history tells us that those dollars will not go to where they need to be. And so that's part of what the possibilities of what this could be for our children are endless, right? The realities are that this work doesn't stop, right? That was the first leg of the marathon. The second leg kicked in right away for us as AQE. It was accountability. Accountability is dollars, implementation, who's saying how the money should be spent, right? Is it the system? Is it the people? And that's where we're at right now in the work of, we need to make sure that these dollars are spent on the children it was meant to be spent for, right? And the communities and the schools.
I mean, you were spitting numbers. You were saying 530 million. You hit us with 12 billion. Like, I don't think I can even fathom how much money that is. Honestly, as an educator in the New York City public school system, sometimes I can say honestly that I get so narrow focused on specifically New York City schools that I forget that New York is like a whole state, right? Like there's lots of other places. Like we see the inequities visibly in New York City, but like you just mentioned, we have, I dare I say like the country, up top, that, definitely are facing all these inequities too. And I can only imagine how this money can definitely just, like you said, the possibilities are endless. I don't think anybody can really fathom how much $12 billion really is. And so I love hearing success stories. You say that all this was conceptualized in 1993 after somebody saw
a parent at that. I want to remember, this is a parent that, he is now Senator Robert Jackson. But he was parent Robert Jackson on a school board. So we can do this. I think his trajectory is one of those stories that really is powerful if you think of it as a Black Muslim man raising kids with his wife in Washington Heights, and his trajectory to be the Senate to actually bring these dollars home. Like he started it and he brought it home. Like I don't want us to miss that narrative of this, right? Like most times we don't get to see the trajectory of a fight like this that's fighting against the system, really, right? And he stayed in the game. He stayed in it for the long haul. His fight was almost a 30-year battle. Like ours as AQE, we were around for about 21 years of that, but that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that this story should empower, right? Empower the people. It's like, listen, if you set your mind to something, we had introduced you and said, this is a story about perseverance. This is a story about, pushing through all the hurdles and seeing the vision, right? Being tunnel focused on that vision and seeing that, like, it may take a long time, but when it all aligns, when the universe comes together and everything aligns, look at what can happen. It had to take a pandemic, okay? It had to take a pandemic for this beautiful thing to happen. And so really another thing we want to know is how did you get started in this? So we see how it was conceptualized through this parent senator now, right? It's conceptualized through that one mind. But how did Ms. Zakia Ansari, how did you get intertwined into this and help to continue to push it forward?
Yeah, that's some story, boy. I've always reflected because you forget about the past sometimes. But I started like most parents as part of the Parent Teachers Association, in my kids' school. At the time, it's about 21 years ago. At the time, my son wasn't born yet. And I didn't even want to join the PTA, but one of my kids' teachers said, you should join. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. I feel like I say this all the time. I feel like at that moment I was getting lost in mommyhood and wifehood. Like I was just a mother. I was just a wife. Like I didn't have, even though I was working, I felt like I don't know if I was getting lost in that space, and I didn't want to get lost in that. I remember watching the Oprah show and the parents being on there, and they were just distraught because their kids had gotten grown and they lived their life by their children, and their kids had all grown up, and they were just like, how could they leave me? I did so much, and I did not want to be that. Like I did not want to be that burden on my kids. And so it was. I feel like this journey was paid for me, and I ran with it. Fortunately, like I didn't know at the time, right? And so joining the PTA, I didn't know what organizing was. I didn't really understand labor and unions, right? Like I knew a labor, but like which part? Like I didn't know the custodians were part of a union. Like you start learning. I also didn't know how entrenched politics was in education, right? And so it was this process of just being part of the PTA. And when I joined it and I got on the board, I was really excited. And one of the leaders who was on the board too said, I don't know why you're so excited. You'll never get anybody to come out. Right.
Oh, and don't challenge me now. Don't give me a challenge.
That's exactly how I felt too. It's like, okay. And so it was this process of being part of the PTA that then led me to being in spaces. So of getting more involved in education and being part of these collaboratives that were just starting and kicking off, where I was trained and learned how to facilitate a meeting. And, I was put in spaces and places with DOE officials. At the time, it was like Dennis Walcott and some of those other folks, right? And we were fighting for something. We were fighting for middle schools in Brooklyn, science labs and science equipment. And so that's where I started to cut my teeth and really understand and learn what organizing was, and to be put in spaces that normally I was not put in, where I was challenging systems of oppression. But I don't think I used those words back then either, right? The lingo and the language has obviously evolved over the years of like seeing and experiencing. But it really was challenging these systems of oppression as it pertains to education, to fight for things children deserve, right? Especially Black and brown kids that they didn't have. And so through that process, I started to grow and find my voice, and find my footing. And through the work, it was very guided. So first that might have been like we were fighting for science equipment. Then it was like science labs, right? And then it morphed into we were trying to build citywide power. And so an organization that still exists today, which when I was a founding parent member of, called the Coalition for Educational Justice, still exists today. It's like all these things just kept building. And so it connected me to the statewide narrative, right? I have a knack for like a worldview, a big picture, seeing the big picture. And so while we were doing city work through those collaboratives, because I started to understand and learn about like class size and then the campaign for fiscal equity, I started to connect that the things we were fighting for on the city level, we can't get because the state is not funding our schools, right? And so I started to get involved in the campaign for fiscal equity fight. So I was working for AQE before, I was volunteering for AQE as a parent leader before I started working for AQE. And so now it'll be 13 years this year actually working with them. But it was through all these different experiences and learning and understanding and, being put in front of people who had power that could make change, and sharing my story as a mother, right? Even though I didn't have a college degree, which for many took a long time before I wasn't embarrassed by that, I realized much later that my PhD is at Zakia. Like, that's my PhD, right? Like raising 8 kids,
Yes, that's right.
public schools, like all the work that I do, like that is my PhD. So that's what I bring to the spaces. But it took a long time, right? And in that process, I learned a lot about myself. I learned about the trauma that I bring to spaces that I didn't realize, So, I saw abuse in my home when I was younger. And so that's why I realized when I hear or even think that someone's angry, there's confrontation at all, my response is to flee, is to go away, right? To not want to be in that space. And so I didn't realize that until much later on in life, like almost late 40s, that was from that experience, right? And so it's a reminder of all these things, of how parents across the board come with different experiences, right? And how do we open our hearts and see them as if in their full humanity, rather they have a 3-piece suit on, they wearing the latest in styles and they got the Jordans, or I come with my hair rollers and I have on fluffy slippers, right? That respect me and see me as a human. And so all those different spaces, made me who I am today, but also helped me to like be able to see big picture and understand, like, if we are able to get these dollars, the work we were doing on a citywide level would be so much better, and we could shift policy and make change. And then also on the statewide level now has gotten me on the national level of understanding, like, the federal government plays a major role in how the state gets funding, and the state to the city, right? And so to be able to make those connections, I think is always helpful for me coming in as a parent, to be able to explain to other parents in a very layman's terms, because I don't necessarily have all the vernacular of this, that, and the other, but I can explain to you like how this could potentially impact your child's education, or, as best I can, right? To really be able to build out more ed warriors in this work, because we need so many more. That's why I'm so appreciative of being able to be on this show, to get the message out and narrative out, that even though we got the dollars, there is so much work to be done, and we cannot miss out on this opportunity. Our children deserve it. They deserve all hands on deck. They deserve us to really understand this, not to be like, oh, it's a lot of money, I don't have time. We have to understand this, because the system will understand it for us, and we've seen how the system does us. It doesn't do us good at all. So
it doesn't. And you brought up so many great points. And as a parent, I remember going to my son's PTA meetings, and I'm just like, what is happening here? Like, there was no understanding of what we're fighting for, right? It was always give dues for a show or something like that, but there was no connection onto the greater good of the children's education. And that's one of the reasons that made me go into education, because before I was an educator, I was an insurance agent, right? So I was selling insurance. So experiencing his PTA and his educational journey is what shifted me into education. And it's very important. I look at the recent presidential race that we just had, right? And without being educated on how that process works, right? That's why more people went out and voted. That's why we were more successful with that. And I think if we take that same transition, just using that as an example of what you brought up, right? If we take that same knowledge, like, let me inform you of how, though your school is in Queens, your principal is not the say or be all. The superintendent is not the say or be all. This is where it comes from. And then it trickles down the line like this, because even in this pandemic, you have like the parents who want their children to go back to school, and it's like, oh, teachers are lazy. No, we're not. We're in a pandemic with you, right? So just having where we have, as people in the work, doing the work, we have to understand and meet parents where they are. But parents also have to have that mind shift. Like, listen, if I didn't want to teach your children, I wouldn't be in this profession. It means nothing to have a summer off, because I done really work 365 days a year, right? Because in my summer, I'm planning, right? So having those stakeholders is very important in the information and getting the information to the people. Do you guys do like information sessions? Like, how does the accountability of the knowledge work out?
Absolutely. I think you unpacked so much there. I think part of that is conversations. Sometimes there is no, like, parents don't think they can talk to teachers, vice versa. Like, someone's had a bad experience. And so that's enough, especially in the Black community. All you need is one shot. You get one shot sometime, and that's all you getting. And so, to face everything happens, right? And so how do we build, and that's just in community, right? Like, how do we sit in these spaces that are uncomfortable and have deep conversations? Because if we focus in on the children, that will always be the case, right? We're like, I don't even have to like you. But if you're educating my child, or if you're a parent of that child, that's the focal point, right? And so how are we, it has always been a lot about communication. So I think that's one, right? Because understanding the bad experiences on all sides, right? Of this is what I saw, and this has happened here. And it could be multiple times, right? But we don't give ourselves enough grace, period. We don't give ourselves, ourselves grace, and we don't give others enough grace. And so that's one piece. I think the other piece, which is, the key for me, is that when I was part of the PTA, I was also in the very beginnings of learning organizing. So those structures that exist, they don't exist for liberation. They exist to keep you in the box. This is the rule. This is what you follow, and you don't go around it. So when you talk about, like, the principal is not the end all and be all, and neither is the superintendent, this structure tells me that they are, right? And so because I was learning organizing at the same time, the organizer was like, there are no boxes, right? Your mind is your vision. Like, you are building, okay, I'm a PTA, yes. And this is how we're going to roll. And this is how we're going to do things, because the parents want to do this way, right? And if it's not, then I know how to, to fight, push back against the system, right? But when you come in those spaces, if you're not getting training, if you haven't had organizing experience, then you want to follow the rules, right? Because the rules say this. And in our communities, that's what we've been guided by. Colonized rules. And so it just seems normal. It seems like they give you these regulations, and I'm going to follow them. And so if you know how to organize, and those things don't exist. And so I think you can challenge those other systems. The other piece, which was, I've done talk so much, I forgot what you asked. Oh, so yes, absolutely. That is the key. Trainings, workshops, there, folks, we get Democratic clubs ask us to come and share what's happening, community education councils, parent teachers associations, all the structures that exist, organizations, period, young people, like, we come and we do it all, but we also create toolkits on our website so that we don't necessarily need to be there. So the information is there, that is friendly, that anybody can read it, a young person, a parent. You don't need a PhD, that they're simple, like they're one pages, they're back and forth. We're really working on building up and being more intentional about having, at minimum, Spanish on translation to our documents and materials, right? Because the reality is, again, we need to build wider and deeper, because AQE is 9 femme women, majority of are folks of color, statewide, and we have our coalition members. But that's still not enough if we have millions of children, and we need to get this narrative out, right? So the trainings, absolutely. We constantly have documents. We do, with the remote piece, we've been doing a lot of Zoom updates. During budget, we was having them constantly over and over again. And so, yes, absolutely. We do a bunch of trainings, and we go out there and share the information. And we have a different training programs for parents, and leaders. And one more thing I want to say to that narrative around, people who want us to go back into school buildings and all that entails, right? There's an action. I'm not going to bring it all up what it is. That's actually happening in Harlem this weekend. And it's for many people who have been gentrified. Some mayoral candidates will be there as well. Mostly white, I'll be quite honest, parents that are there. And their push is like, we need to reopen schools. But they're not from the community. And the community, which are predominantly Black and brown folks, chose not to send their children to school. That was their choice, right? So for white parents to come and say, you should open schools, and to your point, that narrative too, right? Which is like, get teachers back to work, right? That's their thing too, right? Like, as if you don't want to go back to work and be back in schools.
Let me just stop you. As if we're not working right now.
That too. That's right. That too.
Because we're not in a separate bubble where the pandemic is not affecting us. So we got it a little bit harder. We are dealing with the pandemic, with our own social emotional
That's right.
well-being, our children and our families' well-being, and then we got to walk into a building or a Zoom and deal with your child's social emotional learning and well-being, right?
Mhm.
So
So I say all that just to say, like, there's these narratives that get put out there, to your point of like, where is the lack? Like, who are we paying attention to? Are we going to invisibilize Black and brown parents who chose not to? Are we going to actually listen to why they chose not to, and may continue to choose not to send their children to school, right? Because they're valid. And so to have folks plan a whole event with mayoral candidates when Black and brown parents in that particular area have chosen not to send their kids to school, like, it again, it's very, there's a lot of issues in that space that center on white supremacy, to be quite honest, and avoiding and not paying attention to the voices of those who are most marginalized. That has been the issue in this country, and that will continue to be the issue. And so I think it's all part of communication and narrative, and who gets to be seen and who's not seen. And that's the problem. But I think organizing is how we address that.
Right. And I'm sitting here so quiet, and usually I'm not, but I'm sitting here so quiet because, quite honestly, I'm in awe of your testimony. Like, I'm really in awe of your life path and how you just never know where you're going to be guided. And the fact that you like stepped here is like, okay, well, my child is here, so I'm going to join the PTA because that's what I should do if my child's going to be in this school. And it's like you were provided opportunity after opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and you didn't back down from those opportunities. And I just think that it's just, you've been tested, and you're tested so that you can give this beautiful testimony right now. And I'm just like sitting here just like, wow, like I'm honestly just like taken aback by your story. And so you said quite a few pertinent things. And I guess my question is like, how do we then bridge that gap between school and parenthood? Because I know, as a teacher now, there's a gap. There's definitely a gap. And shout out to our parent coordinator, because she's an advocate. She's like, you all have to get to the parents. You have to bring the parents. You need to get them involved. You need to get them involved. And, as when I started teaching at like 23, I was like, how am I a 23-year-old going to tell a grown parent, what to do with their kids? And it's like, you might be able to be my auntie or uncle, So I guess my question is, how are based on your experience, what would be the most effective way to, one, kind of bridge that gap between school and parent, but then also, because you said something really important, you said that they're put in a box, you do this, or as I'm sorry, I'm just so excited. As Ebony mentioned, it's like, okay, we're just going to be fundraising for school, And you mentioned, as you were going through this process, you realized how politically ingrained education really is. And so I guess my two questions is, how do we bridge that gap between school and parenthood? And then how also do we utilize, right? If we're educators, we know how politically involved education is. We know that teaching is a political act. How do we bring that knowledge to the parents for them to also understand, like, yo, you all getting involved in this, you all being empowered, right? Empowered to take a role in your child's education is also a political act. How can we utilize those sources?
Yeah. I didn't know that was a thing either, and I don't know, I've always gone to, before I used to go to meetings and people be like, oh, this room should be filled with parents. And I would always think of like how I felt sitting in that space, like I'm here, so like, how do we embrace the people that are here? And also that I would have been that parent too, who hadn't found my voice yet. And so I've always lived by the narrative and the thought process that there are a lot of folks who just have not found their voice yet. And how to, again, give them grace. There's a whole heck of a lot going on in our communities, as we all know. And this is one more thing that, how do I fit this on my plate? As well as, how are schools doing that? Like, how are you? It is a school's responsibility to figure out what is the thing that's going to get folks? What is the thing that's going to connect to parents? And it doesn't always mean that they're in the building.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're showing up for a PTA meeting.
Right.
To your point, not all of them are worth coming to.
That's
right. There are many that are. But some of them are not. And so if I come to one and it's a bad experience, which is why sometimes you only get one shot.
That's right.
And if I come to that meeting, it's a bad experience, but I know I got to go home and cook, or I got something else to do, I might not come back. Yeah. Right. So how does the school community take on parent engagement as have ownership over all of it? So I've always said, you're in classrooms, there are parents, and you're teachers. You could probably name one or two parents that I don't care, no matter what time I call Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, they here for the trip, they here for that. Yeah. But multiply that by every classroom, multiply that by every grade. And that parent and those educators taking responsibilities, like Miss So-and-so, there's a meeting today, the PTA meeting, you showing up. Like, so the onus shouldn't just be on the PTA board to do outreach to parents. How do you multiply that by the teachers that know parents who are engaged, right? And you be part of that engagement too, right? What are the other things we can do? How do we get parents involved in the curriculum? If the curriculum is culturally responsive, like I want to see what's happening there, right? Some of my schools, we were able to do that, engage parents. Like I want to feel like people want me there. And even when I am at my loudest and most boisterous, right? And I'm not at my A game of looking and being presented and being, looking politically correct. Right? How do schools see that there's something deeper and underlying behind that, right? It may not be everybody, but every school should have somebody that can see that and work with parents and community to see that person as a human and try to help and support. And I think so many times parents come into schools and that bad experience, or I'm having a bad day or whatever, and the school's immediate response sometimes, whether it's the school safety agent in the front that ain't too happy to see you from the get-go, or you get to the office and no one looks up at you or acknowledges you in that space, even though you've been standing there tapping your fingers on the desk, right? And they see it as an annoyance as opposed to this family member is hurting, and who is the person, right? And it's not to be the dean, but who's the person that could connect, right? And sometimes I don't think schools make those connections to all those things, understanding. And if we're not looking out for each other, then who's going to look out for us? So that's one. So I think that the parent school connection is really vital. But we have to see each other as, in our full selves. I'm sorry, I forgot the other question.
It's okay, because you really have me thinking about how it always just pulls me back down to the core of how important a school actually is, and how important it is that teachers, administration, everybody working in that school building are trained in some way on equity, anti-bias, anti-racist, all those other kind of things, because not only if a parent has a bad experience with the PTA, they may not come back, but you may also be dealing with parents who have had bad experiences in schools, period.
That's right.
So if somebody has oh man, high school, that just wasn't for me, they're already going to come up with nervousness, apprehension, lack of confidence to even want to talk to the teacher, talk to the principal based on their past experiences with the school system. And so it's almost as though the same tactics that we use to build community, build empathy, lift a child, you also have to do that with the adult. And I think part of the reason why that doesn't happen is because we see you as an adult. So it's you should know, you should know. And you can't do that, because then you're not meeting the people where they are. And I think that we, wow, I just feel like I'm getting red right now as an educator.
But
read me, Zakia.
Not at all. These are my personal experiences. And so I'm coming from, that's all I can speak to, either that or some, stories I've heard from other parents.
Yeah.
Right.
But to being a parent who is also an educator, we also have to be honest, right? Parents are not held accountable. So when parents are not held accountable, their children then are not held accountable, right? So teachers can do all of the reaching out, all of the I'm calling, I'm grabbing, and I'm doing. And there are some parents who just don't want to be bothered, right? And what we have to remember as educators is that 9 times out of 10, Community schools are not just that one child out of that family going to that school, right? Take, for instance, the school I work at is a school I graduated from. It is a school that my son went to because we lived in the community. My cousins went to that school. So all of the experiences from when I went to the school, from what my mother may have experienced through the teachers, through the leaderships, even though it may have changed, is now embedded and transferred through. So if you got a mom who has 7 kids and now they're all coming through the pipeline, she automatically walks into the building apprehensive because she's like, I don't want to deal with that teacher because my son had her and she did X, Y, and Z. And then there's no way to restore that relationship. So we have to dismantle to rebuild, right? So we have to tear the whole relationship down to say, you know what, we're on one accord and this is what it is. And I know in a school that I worked at, I was going to the PTA meetings as a educator just to support. And then I said, I'm not going anymore because the PTA president waits until the PTA meeting to address issues that is happening. And I have issues with that because if a parent comes to you and say, my child X, Y, and Z is happening, and this is a multitude, you don't wait to the PTA meeting to want to address that. That should have went to the principal or the parent coordinator right away to nip it in the bud. So now we just waited a whole nother month and allowed a child to experience this.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think
that comes from lack of training, right? Hey, just pick me to be the PTA president because I'm good at fundraising. But you're not good at systems, you're not good at organizing, and you don't understand the connection that needs to be bridged between the PTA and the school to make the school community. That's everyone who works there, everyone who lives in the neighborhood, the store owners, everyone is accountable for that school and the children who go there. But once we start breaking down and not rebuilding, it leaves pockets and holes that no matter when we push through, people are falling in those holes, right? And that brings us to the budget. This was a 13-year fight, right? So now we have all this money. How do we prevent people falling into those holes, right? And then we're not getting up. So we make it to the 1 million hit point. We got $1 million for these schools and these programs. Now here come a pitfall. We in that pitfall. How do we get out to make sure the other 12 million, the other $50 million is accounted for and used for great things, right? Because we don't want another situation where we're buying programs like the phonics program. The lady name escapes me who says, you know what, we don't need phonics, we need whole words. And then she admitted that, you know, my program never worked, right? So where is the accountability in that? Now I want to say if a Black woman or male did that, that would have been top-notch news and everyone held accountable, right? But you know, that's another story. I digress.
Yeah. So I mean, I just want to touch on a few things. One, I think most schools are not about in the repair business, right? There are some schools that, you know, if you think about restorative justice practices that we have young people do, I think as adults, we have so much repairing to do in our community, period, right? So I think if more schools were in the repairing business, a lot of the things that happen in schools, like even some of the stuff you shared, like I don't think it would happen, right? I go back to how I started. Like we don't give ourselves grace, and the reality is historic. Like just as Black people, we are demonstrative. Like our voices are elevated. We move our hands and we move, you know, like all those things. And so I think part of that, one, when I talk about the repair, leads to also like children getting suspended, right? People are like, who you think you know, like that whole thing, like this narrative about knowing ourselves, knowing our bodies and what they mean and what they don't mean. I also think that in those moments of educators and others who have to reach out, parents, and they're struggling, like that's why we should have a multitude of social workers and school counselors in buildings. So that shouldn't fall on an educator, because even in that, and I'm not saying it's easy at all, ever, but even in that moment of, you know, lashing out or not feeling like they want to be involved as a parent, like where is the support? There is no help. Like counseling is not a thing often. Can we afford it? Why would I go to counseling? Do I believe in it? Like in our communities, like all those things. And I'm overwhelmed. And so my response is that I don't want to deal with it. like even from that level. So I just wanted to just put that out there because I hear you, and again, I don't say it's easy, but I'm like, that's the work. The work is the hard stuff. It's not the parent that's like, hey, yeah, that was me. I was like, whatever you need me to do, I can do, but so it leads back to those dollars, right, too, because the communication and feeling like the school is a space that I can be in, that people care about me, that my child is taken care of, that, they need this, that, and the other. Now, one of the things we can do is collectively fight to make sure these dollars get to where it needs to, right? So we know we need more school counselors, so we need these dollars for school counselors. And so as parents, we're going to use our voice to advocate on the citywide level to make sure either PS or collectively Brooklyn Borough or citywide that there are enough school counselors in every school. Because one thing is really important, to your point, public education for parents and community members and educators on these dollars, as I shared in the beginning, is extremely important. $12 billion is hard for anybody to imagine except a Bezos or somebody else, which is chump change for him, period, right? So the average person is like, yeah, $12 billion, that's a lot of money. What that means is that we don't have to have a scarcity mindset. So when we say that every school needs school counselors, some schools will need 2 and some might need 10.
Did you see how the mayor just announced, it probably was maybe 2 days ago, how they're going to hire 500 more social worker counselors into the schools?
And all of that is like, first of all, one, it didn't come from, and I'm not saying that's something we need, but it didn't come from us. Like the community, parents and others didn't say we need that, like that number. So where did the number come from? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. What I'm saying is an example of things getting done without our input, right? So in this particular instance, how do we know 500 is enough?
That's right.
Right? Whose school's getting what and how many are they getting? Right. And so that's the second layer of it again. So people announce things, money comes. There's a next layer to that: implementation, who's involved, proven strategies, to your point, right? So culturally responsive sustained education is a proven strategy. Restorative justice, pre-K, early childhood education, right? Those things are proven strategies that we know work, right? Trainings for educators and others, right? Engaging parents in a real comprehensive way, young people being engaged, all those things are proven to work. The issue is, and the only way it happens, if those same people are the ones who are pushing it, right? Because this mayor is not going to do that, right? The chancellor, I have more hope in. This mayor, he has shown his butt for the last 8 years. That's not his agenda, right? And so that's neither here nor there. The organizing happens no matter who is in there. When Mayor Bloomberg was in office, we were like, our organizing was arch enemies up against him, right? But we still got him to invest $10 million in, I'm trying to remember, what's RTI again?
Response to
to response to interventions, or something to that effect. Yes. So we still got him to invest in it, right? That was organizing, right? So organizing can happen whether you have someone who's in office that's on your side or is not. And that's the power of it, which is different than being in the PTA and all those other things. I think I did both. I was able to be part of a PTA and organize, right? And so that political piece that y'all were talking about, that's entrenched in education. One time I testified many years ago and very early on at a city council hearing, education hearing. And I mentioned something, I honestly don't remember what it was. And one of the city council members said, why are you putting politics in education? And I was really taken aback because I think my response was, I didn't do it. Like, it was there. Like, that wasn't me. I didn't say politics shall be in education and so it shall be. It was, right? And I was learning this process. But it was just so interesting that, that he came at me in that way. Everybody, if you're in education, you're in politics, right? Whether it's politics on the district level and how it works, somebody that got to be there to get that, to know who gonna do this for you and why, right? To the things that you order, right? To central, right? All these things, to the meetings that you have, like, it's all political. And if you want funding, like, if you're not using your political voice, as people, we're political. If you're not using your voice to get justice, if you're not using your voice to get liberation, not even just for yourself, but for everybody else, then you're doing it wrong. That's politics. You can't avoid it, right? Now, there are different degrees and there are different levels of it. But politics is politics. You telling parents that they need, this is happening in school and we really need this. It's political, right? Because we need people to make change. We need them to organize themselves to make action. And one thing we've been able to, I've been part of over the years with having 8 kids go through the New York City public school system is different moments and times of being engaged in politics in a loving, caring way that didn't mean you were trying to get somebody elected,
right?
But that we needed to talk to somebody about getting a special education teacher, right? And that connection to parents and school, when a school or an educator or a principal is nervous about going up against, which they should not be, but going up against the system, you having parents that are engaged and understand the system, who the heck better to do it?
That's right.
But what comes with that, which is the scary part, which I challenge and say that's why a lot of people don't, is because we see your stuff too. Yeah. You don't just get to put us outside and say, we need this. We get to see the internal stuff too. And not everybody is built for that mirror being turned on themselves in that moment either, right? So you got to engage and involve parent body. They know all about it. They're going to challenge you too.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out what you want to do. Because if the children are the center in everything that you do, then you should be able to take the good with the bad.
You should. But just like you said, education is politics. Politics is an education, and there is so much to unfold to get us to where we need to be. Mm-hmm. But we got this $12 billion that's going to help at least shift and dismantle some things. So we are definitely looking forward, and however, like, how can parents get involved? What should be the first thing that we say? Hey, go to your school and make sure that they get X, Y, and Z on the agenda for your school to get some funds. How do we get community boards and organizations to get funds, right? Because we know that education does not start and end in a school building, right? It starts at home, and then it may need to continue in a school, in a community-based organization. How can we make sure that the whole collective is not so much taken care of, but a part of this process?
Sure. So I think organizations like BU, right? We got Black educators here who we need to be more connected with as parents and community, right? Like, we have a shared value, we have a shared agenda, right? That
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a special guest that is ringing the doorbell of our amazing conversation. So let us welcome the president of BU, Dr. Shango Blake. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Dr. Blake?
I'm good. I'm going to leave my screen off. I'm sitting here in the dark listening to this conversation, and I'm just amazed by it. First of all, I want to say to both you, Alexa and Ebony, I'm just like, I'm going to have to start like coming up with a DJ Khaled theme, like, and another one, because these shows are just so thought-provoking. And Sister Zakia, I just wanted to thank you for coming on to Black Ed Talks and sharing your story and sharing like this very important information regarding this money and the very valid point that you made about like who says what and community engagement. Sister Zakia and I have been on the front lines together several times. I know the power of rallying and organizing and bringing people together, and that's what that's what BU's about. I mean, BU's exactly about those kind of things. We have to be political because it's in education that they decide who is the future lawyer, doctor, and who's the future inmate. There's a political reality, like Zakia said, that existed. There's a socialization that comes with education. And that's why many of our educators, Black educators, have to be re-educated because we have been socialized away from our own people. And I just wanted to, but that's not why I called. I called in because there was a point that I just wanted to. I mean, y'all had me yelling at the YouTube because I was like, "Oh yes, that's that point. Oh my God!" And I just took a chance and called them. When you were talking about, Ebony, parent engagement, I just wanted to add this one thought. We have to operationalize a culture that says, parents, you are welcomed.
Yes.
Because the parents have to, when you can walk into a school and see if it's an inviting place to parents. And parents can walk into a school and see if it's an inviting place. So that means that from the school safety agent to the administrative assistant in the front office, how are they treated when they walk into the building? Is there a smile? Is there a sign that says welcome parents? Is there are they being treated with dignity no matter how they come in? Is there a engagement, when they walk into the main office? When I was a principal, I had to train my staff because sometimes parents came in not angry, but were angry after they dealt with either a school safety agent or a secretary. So then the question becomes, if I had that experience walking into the building, do you really expect me to show up at a PTA meeting?
That's right.
Well, my entire experience has been negative just walking in. So we have to create and operationalize a culture that says, parents, you are welcome, parents, you are needed, and parents want to engage you as partners in the process. And I'm going to stop there and let y'all get back to your show, but I just wanted to call in and say, I'm really enjoying it. I'm listening. This is great. And Sister Zakiya, thank you again for all the sacrifice and work that you have done. You have been a vanguard. You have been on the, I mean, as long as I've been a principal, you have been fighting for equity in terms of funding of our schools. And I'm glad to see that you're still on it and telling us don't take our eyes off the prize. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Blake.
Okay, maybe we need to add a new feature to Black Ed Talk. So
Yes,
we'll
the
take a
call
call
in.
now.
Yes.
I was like, who is coming?
Right, I was like, he rang it. I was like, did you need to do that? I would
And
definitely do that.
to speak to what he just said, it can be done, right? Because if you look at a company like Chick-fil-A, I've never been until I moved to Chick-fil-A until I moved out to Long Island. And I was like, what in the world? Everyone is smiling. Everyone is nice. You are in the rain, excited to take my order. It is cold out here and you are under this little heat thing every 5 minutes and you are excited to take my order. So it can be done, right? And I just say that to just be like, that's true. Like if we train up, it's like training up a child, right? You train your children not to be disrespectful and rude. It's the same concept.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that one of the key points that I'm taking out of this conversation is humanizing the parents, humanizing the teachers, humanizing administration, humanizing the students. It's just like everybody releasing title and coming down, like leveling down together and realizing we are human. Our concern is to make sure that these children get the best education that they can get. And so let us connect together just off that basic level and be human with one another. And that's really what I'm getting from this entire conversation. And like I said, I'm just quite honestly inspired by this. Just very inspired, and really makes me think about like, okay, well, what can I do at my school, to maybe make parents feel more welcome or to bridge that gap. And to go back to like the political aspect of all this, it's like, I remember at my school, I introduced participatory budgeting to our students. Like, yo, we're going to have this. You guys are going to vote on this. And so I think it's like, it's also shouldn't only fall on the teacher, because my network only goes so far. Now I got a nice little network, okay, I ain't gonna lie, but my network only goes so far, can only extend so much. So it's almost as if everybody in that building should be, as a professional, we were just talking about tenure, professional development, should in some way be figuring out what from my outside life, from my outside connections, can I bring to this school, so that people's voices are heard, so that we talk about the democratic process in US history, but have the students actually participate in a democratic process. Do they really know what it means to get their voices heard outside of voting on what the class constitution is going to be? And so I think that it really takes They really, when you get into education, they don't really teach you about how deep it goes. They don't teach you about, it's like literally the root of everything. It's like the glacier picture. They only show you that you're gonna be in the classroom teaching some kids the content you like. And it's like, nah, dive deeper and keep going about 500 more feet until you get to that root of that cause. And so all I can say is that, like, I'm just sitting here just like, just like look at what, just looking at you like.
My daughter's a master social worker, and she's in elementary school now, I think, but she loves the what schools might deem the hardest kids. That is her thing. That is her specialty, right? And it takes somebody like that. Like that's the work. It's no, and sometimes people can work with young people that way, but they can't work with adults. Like
me.
As I shared, I had trauma that I didn't know. So how many people, adults, come into spaces that it's a trigger? Like, I want to be like, they haven't been seen, they haven't been acknowledged. And so by you not responding to them, that triggers it, right? Like, I've been standing here, you see me here, like, so what Dr. Blake was saying, like, so some things trigger us automatically. And sometimes we just come in with a whole host of a lot of issues that sometimes we don't even know we have. Yeah. And so that's why I'm like, the caring piece of this, like, everybody can't work with that person, right? You may even be an educator, they may be a parent, but who can you go to and say, Ms. Jones, I got another one for you, because me, that ain't gonna be me, but I care enough about our people to bring you into this space. Can you help me with this, right? Because sometimes everybody thinks they have to do everything. If you're not that person, your school should be stocked with the people. Like, if you have a parent who's having a rough time, difficult time, or whatever, challenging time, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so has been really good at this, maybe reach out, social workers, like those types of things. Many of our schools don't even have that period for the young people, much less have it for adults. Right. And I want us to, and especially in the midst after this post-pandemic thing, if we don't think people are going to be, like, educators included, like, if we don't think people are going to not know what's up and what's down, and that we haven't planned for it, so these 500 social workers, hopefully it's enough. Like, there's a lot of repairing that needs to happen. There's a lot of social and emotional healing that needs to take place. But will we see it when we are there as educators and others? Like, will we see that this is a person in need? I think often we see it just an angry person, and that makes sense, right? That's just human nature. So my thing is, like, how do we equip schools? I think that was one of the questions we asked. Like what are the things? Like, how do we? I would first say, go to our website, right, and look at some of the information. We have one pages that talks about the dollars, how much was spent.
Like, if you're on social media, what's your website?
aqeny.org. So that's aqeny.org. Go there, go through it, just comb through it. It's pretty friendly. Like, we have the, different things. You can look up the budget 2021 and get a sense of this. Then bring it back to your school, right? Now, I'm assuming, I'm making these assumptions, so none of my kids are in school. They've been out of school for a minute, even though I got 2 grandkids in public school. But I'm assuming there's like meetings that happen or something else, right? Ask the question. And if you don't get an answer, ask it again, right? Like, we got this much money. New York City is getting $530 million. How much money is that for our school? Right. And if you're not from New York City, if you go to our website, we have and across the board, actually, if you're not from New York City, because I don't think we have it broken down by New York City dollars, but we do by other parts of the state, like different cities and stuff, how much money you're getting. You do the same thing. School board budgets are being voted on now. You need to be able to go there and say, I see we're getting this much from the state, and we have the federal dollars too, and we're getting this much from the federal government. We know these are the top 3 things that we as parents, students, et cetera, want to see in our schools. And I'm making this up, I don't know it to be true. Art and music, smaller class sizes, and more technology, right? So we got this money. These are our needs and what we think, what we need for our kids in our schools. This is how you got to make it happen, right? So that's the politics part of it, right? You got a school board who's making a decision, but you've been armed with knowledge of how much money you're going to get. Now you're putting the onus on them to be on the record to say how you're going to spend these dollars. When we as parents and community members have decided that these are some of the things, what does that look like, right? And so there will be a back and forth, and that's part of it. That's the negotiation piece. That's the back and forth. That's the organizing piece of this, right? So go to our website, look up the information, get familiar with it. Our contact information is there. So if you need to ever reach out, to find out more, take that information, take it to your PTA, talk to more parents about it, wake them up, let them know this is money coming. Keep pushing people to be visionaries, to be transformational thinkers. There can no longer be in this moment right now, well, they said we need this, but maybe we'll only get 2. So maybe we can get 2 special education teachers, even though we need 5. Dream that dream.
That's right.
Because the money is there. For all these years, we've been fighting for the dollars to fund these things, even though the governor and others have always said they just want more money for the sake of money. We never wanted more money for the sake of money. We wanted to provide pre-K for all 4-year-olds across New York State. We wanted for culturally responsive education. We wanted for restorative justice practices, et cetera, et cetera. We knew what we wanted it for. That's coded language.
That's right.
Right? Because our schools were already and have been underfunded for decades. So we know that the governor and others didn't want to give up these dollars because it goes to Black, brown, and poor children throughout New York State. So even in white rural areas where it's extremely poor, these dollars go to those spaces too, right? So it's about knowing these things and standing firm in your commitment and your understanding of, I may not know all of it, but these numbers say this. And if they're not right, then you tell me what the real numbers are. Right. And so there's this constant understanding of things, and we try to break it down enough so people have and there's a toolkit on our website that you can go to. It shows you if you need to write a press release, or what are the steps you can take to do this, that, and the other. How do you do social media stuff with your elected officials and tag them on things, right? There's a lot of elected officials. That's the other thing everyone needs to know. Who you should know on every level, who represents you, who's your city council member, who your city and assembly and senator are, who your U.S. senator, who your congressional representative. You need to know all those things. They matter, right? They matter because the constituents are who they are afraid of.
Yeah.
And many times Black and brown folks are not the ones that are doing the outreach to call their offices. So therefore, when we do call and it's 25 of us, they're like, what the heck is going on? And that's what we need them to pay attention, right? And so I think all those different levels, and be connected on the city, on citywide level. You don't have to, I don't prescribe to the narrative that you have to, or subscribe to the narrative that you have to be part of a parent structure to be engaged. There are people that try to dismiss you as a parent because, people try to do that to me because I wasn't part of a structure. I wasn't nominated. I wasn't elected. What the heck does that mean? I have a stake in this space because it's my child's school. So I don't care if I was elected or not. Right? It is your obligation, is your opportunity to really engage with parents in other ways. So you don't have to be part of a structure. So don't let anybody tell you that you have to be part of a structure to challenge, to be involved, to be vocal. I think at the end of the day, and I'll stop here, to your point, it's about seeing each other in our full humanity and humanizing each other and knowing that we don't know everything, but collectively we can do a whole heck of a lot. And this is a 30-year battle and no one thought we could do it. People would tell us to stop. Why don't you go for something else? Stop fighting for those dollars. They're done. Imagine if we had stopped.
Right. Imagine. And this is, if any time, the best time because of the state of education and what's happening in the world. We have to rebuild. We have to rethink, right? So this gives us the opportunity. We are so honored and just thankful that you were here and blessed this space, right? Because we can talk about, education is this because we're educators, but hearing it from a parent on the front line who is doing it, and I'm not talking about someone who we're talking about we're talking about you who allowed your past, even though you didn't know that you were being built up for this, right? And those traumas, you allowed those traumas, those triggers to put you in places that people wouldn't even know your name. And we thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm like I just keep saying this whole time, I'm just honestly in awe and equally grateful that you came here and told your story, because it's again, it's one of empowerment, it's one of consistency, it's one of perseverance. And it's one of, like you said, having a worldview and really, really seeing people for the human beings and all that we are. And so just to reiterate, we thank you so much. This was a beautiful conversation. We got the money, y'all. So now we got that's what we're gonna leave. We got the money. Okay, the money is in the bag. But like Ms. Zakia Ansari said, the work doesn't stop there. You got me thinking like, I'm about to go to my principal tomorrow. Like, listen, I heard there's $12 billion coming down the pipeline. How's that going on in our school? And, in what ways can we, let me know what's going on so we can figure out how, I deserve to know, right? So it really has me thinking, like, I've never thought about budget before. I never thought about how that can impact my school. I didn't think of, I don't think about those things. So it's like, even me, somebody who's working there, I feel empowered to be like, listen, how is this being spent? And in what ways can we make sure that is really, and it makes me even more empowered to be like, how can we now get our stakeholders involved?
That's right.
Our students, our parents, and everybody involved in this community to be a part of this decision process as to how this money is going to be spent. So we seem to
if I could just reiterate just one more time, I just want to, just acknowledge that, again, I don't think it's easy at all, but I do believe in my heart of hearts that now however parents show up, that they do want the best for their children
100%.
And their experiences sometimes that happened before. And I don't even mean as adults, but as children, and what molds us and guides us sometimes doesn't allow us to express it in the ways that seem are nice, right? And all those things. But I believe in my core that all parents care about their kids, and they may not all show it in this way that we think is the right way. So is there a way for us to really see past that and make sure that we connect parents like that to people who they can talk to? And my daughter tells me all the time that, when she really sits down and talks with parents about their young people, when sometimes they have given up and they have nothing, they just think there's no way that I can do this anymore. Just listening and offering resources and just being there is often enough for them to be like, this is what I needed. I just needed some support.
Something to put you along. And we all need that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful way to end this. I'm filled up from this conversation. I hope those of you who are listening are filled up as well and are energized and activated because, I'm getting a little tired now. We're getting to the end of the school year. Been working since last spring, nonstop. Getting a little tired, ain't gonna lie, but like I'm a little activated again. Like, okay,
yes.
I see, reactivating me to, why I do the things that I do, why we do the things we do. So
thank you both. That's not an easy job that you're having. And so I just want to say thank you for all that you do and continue to do. And y'all better give these women some tenure and stop playing.
Hello.
This ain't organized because I can organize. I've been doing this a minute.
My network only goes so far, but it goes.
That's right. That's right. So when we texting you, don't act like you don't see. I know you don't know our numbers, right? Like, I'm sorry, I lost my phone. Who's this? No, you know who it is.
Right. So I love this. I love this magic that's flowing through here. And I'm sure everybody feels the vibes on the other sides of their own screens. Ms. Zakia Ansari, thank you so much for bringing this perspective to Black Ed Talks. You are what this show is all about, spreading information, telling your testimony, and inspiring everybody around. So thank you so much. If you want to check it out, it's going to be on YouTube. We're going to post it on the Facebook. And that's it, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ramadan Mubarak to my Muslim brothers and sisters. I meant to say that before.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Be